Those who own Marcellus Shale gas interests are happy. There's a lot of gas, and that means a lot of money. But at least some of the surface owners aren't so happy. We'll talk about the problems of the surface owners right now on The Law Works.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Closed captioning for The Law Works is made possible by a grant from the Monongalia County Bar Association to support legal information and education for all West Virginians. The Law Works is made possible by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and legal system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. By the generous support of Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975, providing high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems. And by viewers like you.
There are problems associated with Marcellus Shale gas production that many didn't anticipate. My guest is the co-founder of the West Virginia Surface Owners' Rights Organization, attorney David McMahon. Dave, thank you for joining us.
Dan, thank you very much for having me here.
I've talked to a lot of people who have been approached about having wells drilled on their property or about the purchase of the gas interests, Marcellus gas interests under their property. Is there a particular difference between landowners who own the surface and landowners who own the surface and the gas under it?
Oh, there is a huge difference. If you own the surface and the gas, and then if the gas is produced, you get some royalty. And that's a whole bunch of money these days. One thing that West Virginians are just learning, haven't really learned yet, is how much money we're talking about. One of these wells, a horizontal, a Marcellus Shale well, produces in royalty the first day, $1,000. That's not the total value of the gas, that's the royalty. It tails off a lot after that, but it's a lot of money. Whereas if you own the surface, you don't have a right to any of that. All that you get is the well being put on you, at least them trying to put the well on you, I would hope. And a second job. You have a job where you work, you're now going to have a second part-time job dealing with these people coming onto your land to drill one of these wells.
When we talk about a Marcellus well being drilled on the surface of the land, well, it's always going to be drilled on the surface of land somewhere, but it's going to be, if we're talking about it being drilled on the surface of your land, what should you anticipate? How much space does one of these things take up?
The surface disturbed in the old conventional wells might have been 2 or 3 acres, maybe 4 acres. The surface disturbed for a Marcellus Shale horizontal well is going to be 12.5 acres. That includes some of the road, et cetera. And so there's the huge pad, there may be a water impoundment, there's going to be road.
We have a picture here that your organization has provided to us. We're going to put it up on the screen while we talk about it. I look at this, and it's hard to estimate from a photograph how much space is taken up, but it looks to me as though there are at least several acres occupied here. Describe to us what we're seeing in the picture. What is present at a typical Marcellus Shale well site?
Well, dead center, or a little off to the right, is of course the drilling rig itself and the drilling pad. Generally, they put, this is a relatively early pad. They were going to put 2 horizontal wells on here. Now they're putting generally 6 wells on a pad. They can drill up to 12, but generally I've heard mostly 6.
I have heard talk about trying to put 12 on a pad if it's possible, but maybe the technology isn't quite there yet.
It was actually done once in Pennsylvania, but it's not generally what they're using now. In the foreground is that black pit of water. That's called a drilling pit. It would be much smaller for a conventional well. That's as they're drilling, they use that to wash the cuttings, et cetera. Now some of the more modern horizontal wells don't use a pit, I'm told. The additional thing that would go into the pad, in addition to what happens during the drilling, is there's flowback, but I'll get to that in a second. What you see in the rear is the water impoundment for the frack water, the water that's going to be put down at the end under 7,500 pounds per square inch pressure.
So they build a holding pond out of which they pull the water to do the drilling.
That's right. Now, for a conventional well, if you look right dead center in the picture, there are some tractor trailers, like 4 white tractor trailers. The amount of water required to frack a conventional well would be 2 tractor trailer loads. If you think of those gasoline trucks going up and down the road, the amount of water for two of those gasoline trucks would be required. For a Marcellus Shale horizontal well, you see that pond in the background. That's the size of an Olympic swimming pool. They hold 600,000 to 1 million gallons, and to frack one well, they need that much water. Now, they found out recently that if they frack one horizontal at a time, it doesn't do as well if they frack 3 at a time. So for some of the more modern drilling, they'll need a water impoundment 3 times the size of that.
Now, when we talk about fracking, we're talking about putting water and other materials into the well bore under high pressure, and it's designed to expand the bore, crack the rock around it to facilitate the flow of gas into the well so it can be produced.
That's right, enough pressure to lift the rock. So this stuff's about 5,000 feet down, so enough pressure to lift 5,000 feet of rock, and enough pressure to crack the rock so it can be lifted, and a whole bunch of this water and a whole bunch of these additives that are put down with it.
Now, do you know what these additives are?
I'm not very good on listing all those. I'm the lawyer, not the engineer or the chemist. But there are a whole lot of things. They are designed to keep. There's a bactericide so that nothing grows there. There's gels and stuff to make, because they also put sand down there. Once they open those cracks up, they want sand to hold the cracks open. Things to make it slick. Things to make all kinds of stuff. And what you typically hear from them is, well, you know, that's the stuff under your kitchen sink. It's just the stuff under your kitchen sink, and it's only 0.5 to 1% of the total water that you put down.
That's the stuff that we put those Mr. Yuck stickers on.
Absolutely. You know, the stuff under your kitchen sink is not the stuff in your refrigerator. It's not the stuff you want to drink. It is problem. And when they talk about the volume, they say, oh, it's only 0.5 or 1%. Well, you know, if they're using 1 million gallons of water for the well that you see in front of you, 0.5 or 1% of that would be 20 tons. So on a 3 million gallon frac, that would be 60 tons of chemicals they're bringing onto your surface well site in order to put down the well.
Well, now, there has been much concern, and people have said, well, they're going to put these things down the well. It's going to go out into these long drill bores, and it's going to contaminate the water that I drink. That's not really a problem, is it?
Yeah, it really is a misdirection by the industry to say, you know, there are no proven groundwater pollution or problems from the frac process, from fracking the wells. Well, but that's only one of the many processes. They have to bring the stuff onto the land. They have to store it on the land. About 40 to 60% of it flows back. So what flows back is not just the chemicals they put down, but they bring back chemicals. And the chemicals that they put down mix with the chemicals down there and make further chemicals. So one of the things that comes back is low level, naturally occurring radioactive materials, NORM. So all that stuff, even if it doesn't leak during the actual pumping of it, it can leak before, it can leak after, and what do you do with it? And it's all happening on the surface owner's land.
So there really, truly aren't any documented cases of the water being under pressure put down into the bores causing any problems from these horizontal drillings. It's the fact that the water has to go down, it has to come back up, and it has to be stored on site before and after that causes the concerns. Not
proven. We're still looking, because, you know, there are 5,000 or 10,000 old wells in West Virginia that have not been properly plugged. And we are concerned that if they frack the Marcellus Shale and one of those old wells runs through it, there could be a problem. But there have been lots of pollution problems. We have seen where there are just general leaks on the equipment on the well site, drops down on the ground at the well pad, and gets down and leaches into groundwater. In Dimock, Pennsylvania, there was a big example. A bunch of gas people could light their sinks in Dimock, Pennsylvania. Well, what happened is, again, it wasn't the frack water. It wasn't even the Marcellus gas. As they drilled down, they went through other gas-bearing formations. They didn't cement in the metal casing there. They probably didn't wait long enough when they drilled the surface casing for that cement to set up. So the gas out of that uncemented formation worked its way up through the microannuli that was left in the surface casing and got into people's water. Lots of things can go wrong other than just the frack job itself going bad.
Is that the same technology that's being used today, or was that a first generation or an older technology wells?
The technology of putting metal casing down and cementing it in has been the same method for trying to protect groundwater for many years, but it's just on such a larger scale. I mean, another thing you hear him say, well, we've been fracking for 85 years, so this is not a new process. Well, we've been flying airplanes since 1903. That's when the Wright brothers first flew, but the Wright brother flyer is a whole lot different than a 747 or the space shuttle. And so what's going on is a whole lot larger thing. It's a whole lot more important thing. There's a whole lot more of it going on than ever before. So it is a real concern, A, if you're an environmentalist or if you live nearby, but if you're the surface owner, all this is going on your surface, is going to go on your surface, unless you can stop it, and you may or may not be able to stop it.
Well, in the early days of fracking is short for fracturing the rock, and using the technology we described before. In the early days of fracking, they didn't pump liquids under pressure into a well to fracture the rock. In the early days of fracking, they would drop an explosive down the well, detonate it, and it would crack the rock around the well, and more oil and gas or whatever they were producing would flow to the well. You probably have to put a fire out after that. I don't know. You might have to. Wasn't uncommon. But that's not, they don't use explosives now. They use high-pressure water to do it. So that's a change. The Wright brothers had 2 wings and a pusher engine. Now we have jet engines and fly at hundreds or tens of thousands of feet. Yeah. So technologies do change.
Yeah. Usually water, they also can use nitrogen sometimes there are other formations, not just the Marcellus that they drill horizontally too. I think maybe the Lower Huron, they might frack with something else. But we still have fires. We had an accidental fire in Marshall County, a big fire. And after they pump all this water down to frack the rock, gas flows, when it first starts producing, there's a bunch of this water flows back with the first gas. Well, they can't put that on the pipeline, so they flare the gas. So they actually have these huge 10 or 20-foot flames of gas that they flare while they get a lot of the flow back out too. So there are still fires involved with it too, and it's going to happen on the surface owner's land.
We're talking about the problems associated with Marcellus Shale gas production. My guest is the co-founder of the West Virginia Surface Owners' Rights Organization, Attorney David McMahon. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. The Surface Owners' Rights Organization, I don't want to mischaracterize it, but you are the folks who protest Marcellus Shale gas drilling, at least in some part, because of your concerns. What kind of concerns do you have?
Well, we share concerns with the environmentalists, of course, and with the local citizenry. Another problem with this is to get all that water in that impoundment there, they use trucks, and those trucks are used on local roads.
Now, I have seen trucks that I believe to be coming from Marcellus wells that appear to be loaded with liquids. And I say appear to be loaded with liquids because there's water dripping out of the back of them. They're covered with mud. They have obviously been wet. The surface that they've been driving on has obviously been wet. That would mean to me that these sites can be muddy, that the water that's causing the mud is coming from somewhere. This is not a closed system. There are leaks in this system. It's not dry there. There are problems. There are mishaps.
Absolutely.
And
in addition, there have been 2 studies. A Duke study found that there's elevated levels of methane, that's not native to the area around wells. They're still double checking on that. It needs more checking. Recent Penn State study said they're finding levels, I think it was barium,
boron, I think.
Boron, which is a trace element for them. And maybe that came out of the frack water. Maybe that was just something native that got moved around, but there are definitely problems.
There's no limit or exposure, upper limit for boron. In fact, I heard a little bit about that study just as we came into the studio. So there are things that are happening but are not clearly understood.
Right. 2 more things about how different this is. A conventional gas well that was drilled 5 or 10 years ago took 30 to 45 days from the time the bulldozer got on your land until they were done producing gas, if the contractors lined up right. A Marcellus Shale well, from the time the bulldozer hits your land until they finish just drilling the first well, is 5 or 6 months. They still have to
5 or 6 months.
They still have to frack that well. They're still going to drill 5 or 6 more wells. So this is what's more important than even the size difference that you see is how much longer they're going to be there and making a whole bunch of noise.
Well, speaking of that, you were able to procure for us a recording of a landowner talking about the well drilling that was occurring on his property. We have another picture of that we will put up here on the screen here in a second. Tell us what we're seeing in that picture. Where is that photograph taken from?
That's a clip out of a video. It's taken from their porch. On the right side, you can see the corner of the house. They're looking across the street. I'm not sure these people even own the, I think there's a different tract. I don't think that was the minerals under them. It's the minerals in there.
So where this well is located is on someone else's property.
Right.
But it's fairly close to their house.
475 feet from their house.
How close are they allowed to come?
200 feet. Current regulations let them put the well, not the pad. The well itself can be 200 feet from the dwelling.
And where can the well be?
The well can be 200 feet from the dwelling.
So the pad, if they were drilling on your land, could come right up to your front porch.
The law permits it.
But the well has to be 200 feet away. We have the audio recording that I'd like to play a few seconds of. This is the gentleman who's making the recording. He identifies himself, and the noise that you hear in the background is the noise that comes from the Marcellus drilling process. Let's just pause for about 10 seconds and listen to that.
This is Vicki Tanner. It's March 5th at 1:36 p.m.
David, that sounds pretty loud. How many hours a day do they do that drilling?
24 hours a day for the 30 days that they're drilling each well, and then of course there are other sounds and noises while they're doing other things. And then when they come back and frack, there'll be a bunch of compressors that makes almost equal sound while they're doing the frack job, again for each well.
And this goes on for how long?
30 days for the drilling, night and day. For
And
the
then,
drilling of one horizontal well.
then for the fracturing or the fracking?
I don't really know. Several days, I think, but I'm not sure about that.
And that's for each well that they drill?
Yes. Except if they do the zipper frack and frack 3 at once, it'll be all at the same time, but it'll take longer to frack all 3.
So if someone comes to the surface owner and says, we want to drill on your property, or we're going to drill on your property, here's some money, you should, do they say here's some money, or do they just come in and do it?
Well, current law, they don't have to even let you know they're coming. They can sneak onto your land and survey the well site, and you just find out about it when they apply for the permit. Generally, they do come talk to you first, but often not. So if that happens to you and you're the surface owner, what should you do? If it was a conventional well, I would tell you go right to our website. We have a book that tells you, how, what your rights are and aren't, and how to exercise your rights to file comments on the permit application, how to get the soil erosion sediment control manual, find out what leverage you have, et cetera.
We're talking about the problems associated with Marcellus Shale gas production. My guest is the co-founder of the West Virginia Surface Owners' Rights Organization, Attorney David McMahon. I'm Dan Ringer, and this is The Law Works. You mentioned your website. You have a book that is available through your website. The website is wvsoro.org. It's West Virginia Surface Owners' Rights Organization, wvsoro.org. And your book is available through that website.
That's right. You can just Google West Virginia surface owners. We get about 250 visits a day. But what I told you earlier was for a conventional well. For a horizontal well, we don't think they've got the right to use your surface. They do have the right to use your surface to do whatever is reasonably necessary to your surface to drill to get the minerals of the mineral tract under you. But when they drill a horizontal well, they're not going just through your mineral tract. They're going 3,000 to 5,000 feet, maybe even longer, out horizontally into neighboring mineral tracts. It's our position, if you look at the treatises on the law, that they don't have the right to do that. If they drilled a vertical well on the mineral tract next to you, and they wanted to take a pipeline across you, they'd have to get your permission. The law easily recognizes that. So if they would have to get your permission to put a pipeline across you to get the neighboring minerals out, how is it that they can put a well site on you, one of these monster well sites we've been talking about? We say that they can't. Unfortunately, it's not something where the state gets involved. They will get their permit to do it. So if you want to stop them, you need to go see a lawyer. If that lawyer doesn't know this area of the law, find one that does, or have that lawyer contact the Surface Owners' Rights Organization, and we'll help them out.
It can be difficult to find an attorney who is knowledgeable in the oil and gas industry who is not employed by the oil and gas industry.
That is absolutely true. Now there is a place on our website where we have lawyers who have agreed to take referrals on these cases. You can go to our website for that too.
Is there any way that a surface owner can protect her or himself in all of this, short of going to see a lawyer?
The book explains some things you can do that don't have that much leverage, but one thing you really can do is there's a statute that says they can't drill a gas well within 200 feet of a water well. So a typical complaint we hear is someone, most of West Virginia is hilly, but there's a nice place that's a future home site for you, or your retirement home, or whatever. If you put a water well in the middle of that home site, they can't put their gas wells within 200 feet of it. So one thing you can do is drill a water well to save at least some areas from becoming a future well site.
Of course, drilling a water well is not free.
Not free. And some counties is required a permit, though we're not sure you necessarily have to have a permitted well. If you just do a dug well for your cattle, that's a well, but it's probably best to get a regular well and use it for something, feed the wildlife, feed your stock, if there's a place that you want to preserve for future use.
I had a person come to me as a client not too terribly long ago. He had been approached by a company wanting to drill a well on his real estate. And the parcel that he owned was 15 acres. And I sat down with him and we talked about what the drilling process was, showed him some of the pictures that I found at your website. And I asked him what his intended use was for his 15-acre parcel. And he said, "That is where I live." And I said, "Well, where on this do you live?" And he kind of sketched out a little map of it, and he showed me where his house was, and his house was to one side. And we talked about the size of the drilling pad, the anticipated work that was going to be done on the site, the fact that roads have to be cut in to access the pad. Now, sometimes you can come straight off a public access highway, as we saw in the picture where we had the audio recording. There's a road right there. They just pull over into the field and start. But that was not the way his property was situated. They would have to cut a road across his property. Then once the gas was produced, they had to move that gas off of his property, presumably through a pipeline, so they would have to install a pipeline. It may or may not be along the road. It's going to be wherever they need to put it to get the gas efficiently away from the property. And at the end, I had to tell him, I don't think your parcel is big enough for you to live there and to have gas produced on it. And so he went away asking the question, can I get a contract where they agree not to drill on my property? And what would be the answer to that?
Well, if you own the surface and the minerals, and if the minerals haven't been leased yet, either by you or some predecessor, then occasionally companies will sign a no surface use lease, and you should go for that. If you want to live there, you should hold out for a no surface use lease. Particularly if you've got 15 acres, it will be a lot of money on royalty, but you may as well buy another place to live if you want the pastoral dream home that you were there for. Now, whether they will do that depends on how close they are to drilling. If they're close to drilling, they know where the well pads are going to be, so they know they're just going to come underneath you, they're much more likely to do that. If they haven't figured that out yet, they're not as likely to give you a no surface use lease.
Well, and it is very common, at least in this area, for what are referred to as landmen or a landman to come to your house, and his objective is to lease the minerals under your property, in this case typically Marcellus Shale gas, if it hasn't already been leased. And he doesn't know who the producing company necessarily is going to be. They don't know where the well sites are going to be. They don't know where the pipelines are going to be. And they may not even know whether it's going to be necessary to cut a road in to do the drilling. All they want to do is buy up the rights to produce the gas. And in that situation, the surface owner needs to tread very lightly, I would think.
I would think, and it may be self-interest, but we always say go see a lawyer. You should get at least $1,000 an acre for such a lease. If your fellow only owns 15 acres, he's going to get $15,000. He should put the money in to hire a lawyer to help him negotiate it to find out what he should do about this, because these leases last forever. I mean, it says for 5 years or so long thereafter as there is a producing well on your land, and I've seen wells that produce for 100 years.
And sometimes they come back again
And drill more
in
wells.
the production of minerals or improve existing wells.
I've heard that initially, at least, they had planned to come back and refract these wells in a couple of years, the same wells. They could also come back and drill more wells.
The history of the extraction industries in West Virginia is that they have become more and more efficient over time. If we use the coal industry as a parallel, some coal seams, some coal mines have been opened and reopened 2 or 3 times as the technology increases to allow coal to be extracted. Oil and gas is not particularly different from that. Wells that have been abandoned or shut down are often reopened and production is started again using newer technologies. David McMahon, thank you very much, sir, for being with us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you also for being with us. On behalf of the LawWorks, I'm Dan Ringer. Good evening. On the LawWorks website at thelawworks.org, you'll find a listing of recent The LawWorks programs, additional information about this show's topic, and video of this and recent shows. You can also find the LawWorks programs on YouTube and iTunes. If you would like to suggest a topic for a future The LawWorks show, or if you're a school teacher and would like to receive a DVD of this show for classroom use, send us email at thelawworks@comcast.net or visit us on Facebook.
The LawWorks is produced in cooperation with the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the Mountain State Bar, the Monongalia County Bar Association, and the West Virginia University College of Law. The LawWorks is made possible by a major grant from the West Virginia Bar Foundation, the philanthropic organization for West Virginia's legal profession and legal system, promoting public knowledge of the law in West Virginia. By the generous support of Software Systems Incorporated, a West Virginia company established in 1975, providing high-end support services, programming, and consulting for county government AS400 mid-range computer systems, as well as PC-based systems. And by viewers like you.
From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.